Imagine this. It's late one evening and you're sitting alone, scrolling through your financial app. You look at your savings, your investments, maybe even your income, and there's a quiet thought that crosses your mind. I've been doing this for years. Why doesn't it feel like anything has really changed? You remember when you first started, the excitement was real. You opened your first account, made your first investment, maybe even cut back on things just to save a little more. Back then, every small step felt meaningful. But now, several years in, the progress feels slow, almost invisible, like you're moving but not getting anywhere. And this is the point where most people begin to question everything, not because they're failing, but because they can't see the result yet. The early years of building wealth are deceptively quiet. You're putting in effort, but the system hasn't had enough time to respond. It's like pushing a heavy object that doesn't move at first. You apply force again and again, but nothing dramatic happens. So naturally, the mind starts looking for alternatives, faster paths, shortcuts, something that feels more rewarding in the moment. Because humans are wired to respond to visible progress. When effort doesn't immediately translate into results, motivation begins to fade. And this is where many people unknowingly step off the path, not realizing how close they actually were to a turning point. Because somewhere around the middle of that journey, something subtle begins to shift. The numbers start behaving differently. The growth that once depended entirely on your effort begins to include something else, momentum. Money that you've already built starts contributing to the growth of new money. It's no longer just you working for your finances. Your finances start working alongside you. But here's the problem. This shift doesn't announce itself loudly. There's no notification that says your system is now compounding. It happens quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss it entirely. Now imagine reaching year 8. Not because 8 is magical, but because it represents something deeper. Enough time for consistency to accumulate, enough time for habits to stabilize, enough time for compounding to begin revealing itself in a way that finally feels real. This is often the point where the curve starts bending, where progress that once felt flat begins to rise, and suddenly the same actions that once felt insignificant start producing noticeable results. The same discipline that felt unrewarded begins to feel powerful. And what changed wasn't the strategy, it was time interacting with consistency. Around this point, it's worth pausing for a moment. If you're watching this and realizing that your slow progress might not actually be slow at all, you're on Andrew Finance, where we explore the deeper psychology behind money, growth, and long-term wealth. If this perspective is shifting how you see your journey, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who feels like their efforts aren't paying off yet, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because once you zoom out even further, the idea of a wealth snowball starts to make sense in a much deeper way. In the beginning, you are the entire system. Your income, your savings, your discipline, everything depends on your direct effort. But over time, the system begins to evolve. Each dollar you save or invest becomes a small worker inside your financial life. At first, you only have a few of these workers, so progress is slow. But as the number grows, they begin producing more on their own. And eventually, the system reaches a point where it no longer depends entirely on your input to keep growing.
This is the moment most people never reach, not because it's impossible, but because they stop before the system becomes self-reinforcing. They quit in year 3 or year 5 when the snowball is still small and fragile. They mistake the lack of visible results for a lack of effectiveness. But in reality, they were in the phase where patience matters most, the phase where consistency feels hardest because the reward hasn't caught up yet. And this is where psychology becomes more important than strategy, because the strategies for building wealth are not a mystery. Save consistently. Invest wisely. Avoid unnecessary losses. These ideas are simple, but executing them over long periods without visible rewards requires something deeper. It requires belief in a process that doesn't immediately prove itself. It requires the ability to act without constant validation, and that's where most people struggle. The world around us doesn't help either. Social media shows rapid success, overnight growth, people talking about massive gains in short periods. And when you compare that to your own slow, steady progress, it's easy to feel like you're doing something wrong. But what you're seeing is often the visible part of someone else's curve, not the years of flat progress that came before it. The wealth snowball doesn't look impressive in the beginning. It looks boring, repetitive, almost pointless, until it doesn't. By the time you reach that later stage, everything starts to feel different. Decisions become easier because your margin for error is larger. Opportunities become more accessible because you have resources to act on them. Stress begins to decrease, not because life becomes simple, but because your financial system becomes stronger. And the most interesting part is that once the snowball reaches a certain size, it becomes harder to stop than to continue. Momentum takes over. And that leads to the final perspective shift. The most important year in your financial life is not the year you start. It's the year you almost quit, but didn't. It's the year where nothing seems to be happening, but everything is actually building beneath the surface. It's the year where your patience is tested more than your strategy, because that's the year that determines whether you ever reach the phase where your effort begins multiplying instead of just accumulating. Year 8 is not about a specific timeline, it's about a threshold, a point where time, consistency, and discipline finally intersect in a way that becomes visible. And the people who reach that point are not necessarily smarter or more talented, they are simply the ones who stayed long enough for the system to reveal itself. If this video changed how you see slow progress and long-term wealth, then you're already ahead of most people. This is Andrew Finance, where we go beyond quick wins and explore the deeper systems that actually build financial freedom.
If this video opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe, because what you learn today can save your future tomorrow.